It was a sunny morning in Washington, D.C., just 2 days after Memorial Day. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint scent of flowers left behind beneath the war memorials. The atmosphere was quiet, solemn. Veterans and visitors continued to come and go, many standing silently before the granite walls, their eyes heavy with memories. Among them walked an older man, slowly and with purpose. He leaned on a wooden cane, dressed in a Weather Marine Corps jacket adorned with medals and a faded patch that still held its honor. His back was straight, but time had worn him down. His name was Staff Sergeant Robert Mills, a retired Marine, a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. He walked with the weight of years and names lost. He made his way toward the wall, the one etched with the names of fallen brothers and sisters. Step by step, he approached, then stopped. He lowered his cane, took off his cap, and raised his hand in a sharp salute. His arm trembled slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on those names. The air felt thick. Nobody spoke. A full minute passed, silent but heavy. Then, from the left, 2 mounted police officers appeared, officers of the D.C. Metro Police. They wore crisp uniforms and rode tall, strong horses. The lead officer pointed towards Sergeant Mills and called out in a flat, detached voice, "Sir, we need you to move along. Please step away from the memorial." There was no kindness in the tone, no understanding. It was just a command. Mills didn't react at first. He kept his hand raised for a second longer, then slowly lowered it. He turned slightly to look at the officer, but he said nothing. His gaze was firm. The officer repeated, "Sir, move along, please," this time with more force. Still Mills didn't move. He stayed where he was, head bowed once again, hand clenched tight around the cane, as if anchoring himself to the very ground. That's when the first officer dismounted. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward Mills. No warning, no pause. And then he shoved him. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a hard, forceful push to the chest. The old man stumbled, his cane slipping from his hand, skittering across a stone. A split second later, he fell backward, hitting the pavement with a thud that made a few people gasp. He clutched his side, trying to breathe, pain flashing across his face. Before anyone could react, the second officer circled closer on horseback. With Mills still down, struggling, that officer delivered a booted kick to his ribs, sharp and brutal. It was sickening. The Marine groaned, not a scream, just a low sound of hurt, quiet but heartbreaking. People froze. One woman covered her mouth in shock. A man whispered, "Jesus Christ," and then phone started recording. The officer stood over him for a second longer, then turned away. No apology. No assistance. They got back on their horses and slowly rode off, leaving the old man lying there, wounded, confused, and dishonored, on sacred ground. I saw the cane still lying there. Blood showed faintly on his temple. He tried to sit up, but winced, breathing shallowly. No one dared to approach just yet. The silence grew heavy. Some people stood still, looking at the officers as they disappeared. Others looked at the old man, unsure what to do. Then someone finally spoke. Call someone in the military. A middle-aged man pulled out his phone, walked away from the crowd, and made a call. His voice was calm but urgent, and then silence returned. But in that silence, something had changed. It wasn't a roar or a siren. It wasn't a protest sign or a speech. It was just a phone call, a call to someone in uniform, someone who still knew what honor meant, someone who wouldn't let this stand. Staff Sergeant Mills didn't need to shout. He didn't have to fight. His presence, his quiet resistance, was enough. What had happened here had been seen, and it would not be ignored. I stood there, frozen, watching the man who had once carried a rifle for this country, now lying on the cold stone beside a wall of names, a wall that spoke of sacrifice, a wall he helped build, not with bricks, but with service, with years, with pain. And now, right here at that same wall, his dignity was ripped from him. But he was not alone. The moment that call was made, the silence around us became something else, something charged, something waiting. Because this wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was a breach of trust. a dishonor. And that kind of thing, it doesn't go unanswered. Not by the ones who still wear the uniform. Not by the ones who remember what it stands for. The morning after the incident, the sky over Washington, D.C. was heavy with silence. Word had started to spread, slowly at first. A few videos shared by witnesses had made it onto smaller pages. Then the veterans groups picked it up. By the time the sun touched the memorial again, something had changed. No one heard sirens. There were no protests, no chants. But around 9 a.m., the quiet was broken by the low hum of diesel engines. Military trucks, clean and unmarked, moved down Constitution Avenue. One by one, they stopped just outside the National Mall. The men who stepped out were not carrying rifles or riot shields. They were in full dress uniform, the old guard, the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the unit that guards Arlington, the ones who bury the nation's fallen. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. With discipline and silent precision, they moved to surround the memorial. They didn't push anyone away. They simply stood, shoulders squared, boots polished, faces calm. Their presence was neither aggressive nor passive. It was protective. It was sacred. They stood there not to confront, but to guard. The crowd began to grow. Some had heard rumors and came to see if it was true. Others had seen the video online. The one where a decorated Marine was shoved to the ground like he was nothing. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Justice for Estienne Mills. Hashtag Hallowed Ground. Hashtag Stand with Veterans. Within hours, hundreds were gathered at the site, some holding flags, some with tears in their eyes, others just standing in silence. News outlets picked it up. Phones went live. Streams from the memorial hit 100,000 views within the hour. But through it all, the old guard remained silent. Their calm presence spoke louder than any statement. Contrasted thick in the air. The local police returned, tentatively. A few mounted officers approached the scene, unsure of what to do. Their uniforms looked sharper than before, but their eyes avoided the soldiers. One officer dismounted, looked toward the crowd, then back at his team, and left. Just like that. Quietly. Others followed, melting away into the distance, trying to avoid the cameras, the glares, the shame. Then, through the crowd, a man in uniform stepped forward. Not young. His silver oak leaf insignia marked him as a lieutenant colonel. He walked with the same posture as Sergeant Mills had the day before, upright, firm. He wasn't here for speeches. He wasn't here to grandstand. He walked up to the steps of the memorial, turned to face the gathering, and said only this. This is hallowed ground. Respect is not optional. That was it. No threats. No shouting. Just the truth, delivered with quiet strength. A hush fell over everyone. People lowered their phones. Some veterans in the crowd saluted. Others just nodded, the lump in their throats too big to speak past. The police were gone. For now, at least. No statements, no explanations. Just absence. But the silence they left behind was filled with meaning. One of the witnesses, an older woman who had been there the day before, walked up to a local reporter with her phone. She handed over the original video, the full one unedited. The kick, the shove, the blood. By the evening, the video was on every major network. Headlines blared. Veteran assaulted at memorial. Who stand for the ones who served? The old guard responds with silent vigil. Across the country, people began to take notice. Not just the elderly, not just veterans, but everyone who still felt something stir in their chests when they saw the flag raised. Something was shifting, because that moment, when the soldiers arrived and simply stood, not to fight, not to shout, but to protect, spoke to something older than outrage. It spoke to duty, to loyalty, to brotherhood, and to the truth that those who served never stand alone. The morning after the incident, Washington was no longer calm. At first, it was just a few people, old veterans in ball caps and faded jackets, standing quietly by the memorial wall. But by noon, they came in dozens, then hundreds. Some came by car, others took buses or trains. Veterans from every corner of the country gathered, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. Some walked with canes, Others rolled in wheelchairs, but their presence spoke louder than any protest chant. They didn't yell. They didn't riot. They simply stood, silent, proud, and unmovable. Signs began to appear. Justice for Sergeant Mills. This is sacred ground. We don't leave our own behind. People placed folded flags and unit patches along the base of the memorial. The air grew thick, not with anger, but with sorrow and determination. The footage had gone viral overnight. Millions watched the shaky video of Staff Sergeant Robert Mills being shoved, then kicked as he tried to steady himself in front of the wall. The sight of his decorated jacket hitting the pavement struck a nerve deep in the country's soul. By the end of that week, the president addressed the nation, standing before the White House. He spoke directly and without hesitation. To our veterans and to the nation, what happened at that memorial was unacceptable. Disrespect to one veteran is disrespect to all. We must do better. We will do better. The Department of Justice launched a full investigation. The 2 mounted police officers involved were placed on administrative leave. One resigned within days. The other declined comment through legal counsel. Behind the scenes, the mayor's office scrambled to contain the fallout. But it was too late. The story had caught fire. That same week, a national petition calling for reform around veterans' rights at memorial sites surpassed 2 million signatures. Several veteran organizations joined forces and held a press conference on the Capitol steps. Former generals, wounded warriors, Gold Star families, all stood together. The message was clear. America needed to honor its promises, not just in war, but in peace. Meanwhile, Robert Mills remained at the VA hospital. He had 2 cracked ribs and a fractured hip. A local reporter was allowed a short interview. The footage aired that evening. Lying in a hospital bed, Mills didn't show bitterness. He looked tired. His voice was gravelly but calm. "I don't hate those officers," he said, "but I never thought I'd be scared of police after surviving Fallujah." That line echoed across homes and headlines. A man who had fought through the worst of modern warfare now feared the streets of his own capital. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Congress, under intense public pressure, fast-tracked a resolution, the Veterans Memorial Protection and Respect Act. It passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The law mandated federal protections for veterans visiting national memorials. It required specialized training for officers assigned to those areas. And it created a federal oversight body, staffed by veterans, to ensure such places will remain safe, solemn, and free from abuse. It was a rare moment of unity in Washington, and it was driven not by politics, but by principle. Mills couldn't attend the signing. He was still recovering, adjusting to life in a wheelchair after complications from surgery. But lawmakers made sure his name was etched in the official record. One congresswoman, a former Army medic, called him a quiet hero who reminded America of who we are. And time, as it always does, moved on. News cycles shifted. Protests faded. The city grew quiet again. But 1 year later, on the same June morning, I returned to the memorial. It was early, just after sunrise. The plaza was mostly empty. A few joggers passed by. Birds sang in the trees. The stone wall glistened with dew, and the names carved into it seemed to shimmer in the soft light. And then I saw him, Robert Mills. He was in a wheelchair now. A blanket covered his lap. He wore that same old Marine jacket, medals pinned over his heart. A young man, his grandson, maybe, pushed him slowly forward. When they reached the center of the wall, the young man stopped. Mills wheeled himself closer. Then he raised one hand, trembling, steadying with effort, and offered a salute. It was not a long salute, but it was full of something deeper than words. Pride, grief, dignity. I stood off to the side, watching in silence. And I remembered something a fellow veteran once told me. Courage isn't always on a battlefield. Sometimes it's just showing up, even when you're tired, even when it hurts. Robert Mills showed up. So did the nation, eventually, because sometimes it takes a moment of disgrace to remind us of who we want to be. And sometimes it takes one old Marine saluting a cold stone wall to remind us of the price of forgetting. This story isn't just about one man. It's about all of us. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Today's story wasn't only about a veteran being pushed to the ground. It was about something far more sacred: honor, memory, and the way we, the living, choose to respect those who gave everything. If you are a veteran, if your father once served, or if you've ever stood silently before a wall of names and felt your heart tighten, then you understand what this truly means. And if this story touched you in any way, I ask just 3 things from you. First, please subscribe to this channel, Old Soldier Story. Here, we tell the stories the media no longer covers. The stories of those who wore the uniform and sacrificed not just in war, but in the life that followed. Second, leave a comment. Let us know what you're thinking. Maybe it's a name you remember, a base where you once served, or a feeling you haven't shared until now. And third, share this video. Send it to a veteran who lives alone, to a grandchild who never knew why their grandfather avoids crowds, to someone who needs to be reminded, we don't leave our own behind. My name is Mike, a storyteller, veteran, and one of many who still believe that there is goodness left in America. Thank you for spending your time here. We'll meet again, somewhere, in another story, in another quiet corner of this country we love. United States Old Soldier Story.